In today's lesson, we're going to talk about parallel lines, we're going to talk about perpendicular lines, what those two words mean. So, before we get into a definition of what parallel means and what perpendicular means, it's probably best to work ourselves through an example. So we have here two parallel lines, and I have here two lines that I'm calling perpendicular. I have one that's red, one that's blue on my screen. So I'm going to label the red one as line 1, and I'm going to label the blue one as line 2. What you can do on yours is if you have a highlighter, you can highlight them different colors, or you can just leave them as the first one and the second one. And just make sure you put a 1 and a 2 on top. When we're talking about different types of lines, when we're talking about parallel or perpendicular, what we're really talking about is what are their slopes. So the first thing I want to do is calculate the slope of line 1, my red one. And to calculate those slopes, it's best to find ourselves two nice points, and by nice point I mean a point that crosses on this grid. So I have the point -1, 0, and I have the point 0, 3 up here. And to calculate my slope, it's just the same thing as saying rise over run. So to go from my first point to my second point, I'm going up 3, 1, 2, 3. And I'm going over one space, 3 over 1, which is just equal to 3. To get myself my slope of line 2, I'm going to work through the exact same procedure. Picking myself two nice points, I have one here at 1, 1, and I have one here at 2 and 4. So to go from point 1, 1 to point 2, 4, I have to go up 3 boxes and over 1. So the slope of the first line is 3. The slope of my second line is 3. I'm calling these parallel lines, and hopefully what you're noticing is the slope of both of these lines is the same thing. Parallel lines have the same slope. Parallel lines have the exact same slope. Perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines. Okay. Start by labeling these as 1. Label my blue one as line 2, and we're going to work through the exact same steps here. So my slope, my rise over my run, my first point, and my second point. So I have a point at 0, 0. I have a point at 2, 1. I have to go up 1, and I'm going right 2. So my rise is 1, my run is 2. So my slope is 1/2. Remember, you're always reading your points from left to right, just like you're reading a book. If I go to get my blue line, I'll start with that same point there. M is equal to rise over run. To go from my first point to my second point, I'm going down 2. Now remember, when I'm going down, I put a negative sign in front, and I'm moving right 1. -2 divided by 1 is just -2. Perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals. And in English, what that means is if I have one slope and I have another one, if I have a negative reciprocal, it just means that I flip it upside down. One of them is positive, one of them is negative. So I have here 1 over 2 and -2, which is the same thing as -2 over 1. So if I flip this, I get 2 over 1, put a negative sign in front. I have perpendicular lines that are negative reciprocals. And just to kind of summarize this, lines that have the same slope are parallel. And lines with negative reciprocal slopes are perpendicular. Perpendicular. So our example. Are the following pairs of slopes parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Now this is the type of question that you will see on an assignment, you will see on a test. And what you're doing is you're comparing the two of these, and you want to find out if they're the exact same or if one of them has been flipped with one of them negative and one of them positive. Or if none of the above apply, they're neither. So if I have 2 over 3 and 3 over 2, well, the first thing I notice is that 2 over 3 and 3 over 2 aren't the exact same thing. So I know right off they're not parallel. Next check, are they perpendicular? Well, I have 2 over 3. If I flip it upside down, I have 3 over 2. So my first check is done. However, they're both positive. In order for them to be perpendicular, one of them has to be negative. So they're not perpendicular. That means that they're neither. Second example. I have negative 1 over 2, and I have 2. So the first thing I notice, negative 1 over 2 and 2 are not the exact same thing. So I know that these are not parallel. Now, my next check is, are they perpendicular? Well, 2 is the exact same thing as saying 2 over 1. Again, mathematicians are lazy people. We try and take away anything that we don't need to show. If I have just an integer, my bottom number here, my denominator, is always a 1. So if I have 1 over 2 and I flip it, I get 2 over 1. The first one's negative, the next one's positive. So both of those checks tell me that yes, this is perpendicular. Perpendicular. 1 over 2 and 4 over 8. Well, if I take a look at this 4 over 8, the first thing I should ask myself is, can I reduce this? Well, 4 over 8, if I divide the top by 4, and I divide the bottom by 4, in other words, if I reduce this, 4 divided by 4 gives me 1, 8 divided by 4 gives me 2. So this reduces to 1/2 is just 1/2. 4 over 8 becomes 1/2. Since these are the exact same slope, I have parallel slopes. Parallel. I have 0.1 and negative 2 over 20. Now I have a decimal and I have a fraction. Remember, if I have a number and I don't have a denominator, just like in this case, this is the same thing as saying 0.1 over 1. So I'm just going to start with this blue number here. 0.1 over 1, we don't like to have decimals anywhere in a fraction. So to get rid of a decimal place, I'm going to multiply this by 10, which means I need to multiply my bottom by 10 as well. 0.1 times 10 is 1. 1 times 10 is 10. Next thing we'll do is take a look at this negative 2 over 20. So negative 2 over 20. I can divide both the top and the bottom by 2 to reduce this fraction. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. 20 divided by 2 is 10. So these are two very different things that we're comparing. I'm not saying that they're equal to each other. So I have the 0.1 is the same thing as 1 over 10. The negative 2 over 20 is negative 1 over 10. Well, I have one that's positive and one that's negative, but I don't have one that's the flip of the other. They're the same numbers. So this tells me that, again, I have neither. So again, perpendicular means that if I flip it, one's negative, one's positive, I have perpendicular. Parallel means that if I can reduce one or both of them and get it to work out to be the exact same number, I have parallel. And if neither of those apply, it's neither parallel nor perpendicular.